So Arthur, it's been like really inspiring, fantastic, wonderful. Yeah, and I suppose to a certain extent emotional, sort of accompanying you on the journey that you've been outlining. That brought you here to Johannesburg, right?
Yeah.
I agree with you. South Africa is a beautiful country. We haven't explored it yet.
Yeah.
But Arthur, and so too is Uganda.
Yeah.
I was reading watching a documentary on Uganda and, how Uganda came about.
Yeah.
And that part, the Great Lakes and, the wonder and the beauty and the natural beauty of those areas there.
Yeah.
But Arthur, specifically what I want to pick up on, that, you are right in a sense that ActionAid, when an organization is able to develop its own, let's call it organic intellectuals, that people that are rooted in, the day-to-day struggles of people. I think for me, that is an important organization. And somewhere along the line, I think you coming through the ranks of the organization, I'd like to pick up in another conversation, what does that really mean? And how does an organization work in ways that it's able to not just, retain people, but build people, that rise through, let's call it the ranks, through the organization, You're being a volunteer, working in an education setup and then working in an intersectoral kind of NGO, then moving to ActionAid. Yeah. All of these things seem to me a kind of natural progression, if you like.
Yeah.
That your calling was clear. That when you moved, the move from one organization to the other seemed quite seamless.
Yeah.
It seemed, as I said, very natural. And then when you come into ActionAid, you say that you found 90%, 95% of the values of ActionAid that were totally aligned with your values.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, that is really, and I'd like to pick up further, sort of on those kind of issues, because we can retrace those things, right?
Yeah.
Can you describe what it was like working in Uganda from a social justice perspective?
Yeah.
At any stage where you, did you find yourself compromised because of the security situation? Did you find yourself being able to navigate difficult attention by the authorities? Anything like that, Arthur? Please, could you describe what it was like for us here?
Yeah. So if you go onto social media, there is a really prevailing narrative in Uganda that I was pushed out of the country by the government. Because in 2017, when I had already actually got a job with the Global Secretariat, ActionAid Uganda was central to a national campaign to reject a proposed constitutional amendment that would have opened the door for what many, for lack of a better word, is like life presidency. We had, Uganda has a, treacherous history of conflict, civil strife and political instability. Since independence, we've never had a peaceful transfer of power. Yeah. Many countries in Africa should not take this for granted when you have changes in South Africa, even within the party.
Sure.
Non-violent countries like Tanzania, Senegal, Ghana, we can't take this for granted. Uganda has never had a peaceful transfer of power. We've never had a president that leaves power and lives in the country, So two constitutional guarantees were there in our 1995 constitution that, one, we will have executive term limits. So the president would lead for 2 terms maximum and then leave. That was removed from the constitution. The second guarantee that was in the constitution was age limit. So beyond the age of 75, the framers of Uganda's constitution felt that with the whole demographic situation in the country, that that was beyond 75. I think they didn't feel that the leader would deliver the best for the country. So that was in our constitution as well. And the third guarantee was free and fair elections so that people can determine who their leaders are. The first provision was removed from our constitution in the amendment in 2005, 2006. The third one, which is free and fair elections, is something that we've never had because electoral politics in Uganda is heavily militarized, very compromised. Mm-hmm. Most elections are contested in court, sometimes with a margin of victory of like 3-4. You know, the 2001 election had to be taken to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court voted 4 and 3 against. You know, annulling the election. We've seen elections annulled also in countries like Kenya. But anyway, back to Uganda. We fought ActionAid and many other civic groups to try to reject this proposed amendment to remove age limit, because that was the only guarantee left now for a peaceful transfer from the current ruler in Uganda. And so ActionAid was attacked for its stance, and maybe wrongly, they thought we were the main brain behind this movement that was called in our country Tojikwatako, which means don't touch. Okay. Don't touch this provision in the constitution. I mean, this was very much led by ordinary people. We were catalyzing in many ways and contributing like any other player. So ActionAid was surrounded, was besieged by the security forces. Our bank accounts were frozen. The office was closed, and I was the country director at that time. So we fought very hard. We took the government to court and said, no, it is our civic right, to stand and defend the Constitution. The Constitution gives us this power as people. Correct. And this is another beautiful thing about ActionAid, because many international NGOs cannot do this because they have, foreign registration. They have lots of expatriates. ActionAid is 99% national people who have a stake in their country. I was maybe the 5th national country director for ActionAid. And so I have a stake in the country. Before I joined ActionAid, I'm a Ugandan who has a stake in the country. So anyway, this environment was not very conducive for those who were standing against the difficult political situation. And many thought then that part of the discussion with the government was to get me out of the country, and it's completely false narrative, because I already had an opportunity to join the ActionAid International, the Global Secretariat, before that. So you asked about the environment for our work. It's tough, working for justice, working for rights of people, landless people, people deprived of public services, fighting against corruption is tough business, because they have vested interest. The system that runs a lot of our governments is not just national, it's global. So fighting for that is risky business. And so that's the kind of environment that we worked under, and many NGOs do not generate their own income, so you're also full-time looking for funding for your programs. Many dependencies sometimes that is created with donors, but we need to navigate all this because we believe in the mission, and it's the conviction that we have that really matters. I remember one particular time when I was made an offer when I just finished my master's, I believe, before I joined ActionAid. So the NGO forum that I worked for was going through deep financial problems. There were, of course, internal challenges we had, but funding was not coming through. And so an American NGO at that time invited me and said, I've seen you, the director then, I've seen you, standing for this and all that. I would like to offer you a job, at this particular organization. I won't mention it. And literally gave me an offer, like $3,500. That was huge amount of money.
I'm sure.
I was getting at the NGO forum when we get paid, because it was not always the case. It's like $500.
Yeah.
So I said no. And she was shocked. She said, like, how much money do you earn at the NGO forum? I said, actually, we spent 4 months without salary.
Yeah.
Because we are doing lots of internal stuff and we are fundraising and all of that. But to be honest, with your $3,500, it's easy for you to get somebody else like me. But NGO Forum, for the situation in which they cannot find a person who would volunteer. So there is work to do at the NGO Forum to put it back on its footing. And so thank you, but I will not take the offer. So the funding environment is a tough one up till now for organizations in Uganda.
May I just commend you for the moral courage, if you like, that you demonstrated in the face of a very lucrative offer on the table. To be able to say no, I'm sure, it was not easy.
Of course.
Especially in that context.
Definitely. So the operating environment is tough from the government, but that's not unique to Uganda. But you really need to have the courage to stand through and continue fighting for justice for people. And this is very central to what ActionAid does. But eventually, anyway, I worked with others and we were able to put the NGO Forum back on its footing, got funding. By the time I left, it was flourishing, an organization. Up to today, NGO Forum is flourishing. It's something I'm happy about. I'm no longer there for the last 15 years or so, but I am proud about that decision. So it's a tough environment, Gino, but it's not a comfortable. Many people think that working for NGOs is such a luxurious thing. And we were accused when we were in Uganda as part of the blackmail that sometimes the government gives. These guys are just driving big cars, But when you go to the assembly of a national organization like the NGO Forum, you don't see these big cars. It's just bicycles. People come walking, coming in public transport. That's the majority. Yeah. And what keeps us in the struggle is the belief that we can have a better society. It's not so much what we earn. Of course, when you're fortunate to earn a salary, it's a big bonus. But that's not the reason why I work for the sector. Yeah. So, tough environment, but driven a lot by conviction. That's the context in Uganda. It has since gotten worse, unfortunately. And many organizations are even struggling more today. But I firmly believe that the cause that we stand for in Uganda, for a better country, is something that is worth fighting for as long as you have whatever means that you can, speaking, mobilizing, organizing. Some of these things that you can even do without funding. Yeah. It's really just your ability to volunteer your time. And I do that a lot still, even if I'm not in the country.
Yeah. In thinking about the environment, of course, as you say, it's very difficult because, they can either put you in jail or they can close your bank accounts, Which one? Both are they're designed to render you null and void, as it were. Right?
Correct. Yeah.
But I'm thinking about Uganda also in the context of the region. If you take Sudan, the borders, if you like, Rwanda, even the Horn of Africa, and the DRC. If you look at, and you spoke about, of course, the military is very powerful in those countries, right? I mean, it's the one institution
that works.
It's the one institution that never has a problem with funding, as it were.
Exactly.
Right? So, how do you see, yourselves, of course, in the context of operating inside Uganda or the territory of Uganda, but in relation to the region as the kind of the eastern part, or the Great Lakes as you call it, and
Yeah.
sort of doing social justice work from a regional perspective. How difficult is the difficulties amplified, Arthur? And I'm asking you to speak not necessarily as ActionAid, but like as an activist, as
Yeah.
somebody who's concerned about social justice.
Yeah. Yeah. So we take pride as a people in working together, and so our governments do the same. So this whole economic and political integration process is part of trying to work together with the neighbors and other peoples. In fact, it's something that we should have done a lot more naturally if we didn't have these fake colonial boundaries that were created by colonialists just to divide
Are
us.
you referring to the East African
Yes,
community?
yes, exactly. I mean, some of the borders we have are completely artificial between northern Uganda and South Sudan,
Correct.
between eastern Uganda and western Kenya,
Correct.
between western Uganda and DRC. Just artificial.
And Arthur, isn't that precisely because you have a going back centuries, you have thriving civilizations that were operating in that particular region, right?
Precisely.
Okay.
We had kingdoms. If you look at the map of Africa centuries before colonialism, we just had different kingdoms that cut across all the boundaries that we have now boxed ourselves into as country borders. It's just impossible to move from one place. Sometimes it's easier to go to Europe than to go to DRC from Uganda. It's just unbelievable. But anyway, the question about Uganda's place in the region is an important one. One distinctive feature about Uganda is that it has had one ruler for the last 39 years. And part of the reason is that it's quite unique because we've seen changes in DRC, we've seen changes in Kenya, we've seen changes in Tanzania, a lot more frequent. So Uganda, and we've seen changes in Burundi. So Uganda and Rwanda, the countries in the region that have had presidents serving for, and they're of course connected. Kagame and Museveni are closely connected. They fought in same liberation wars, so-called. But the point is that Uganda has had a stable leadership for a long time. It's had a lot of vested interest by the Europeans and the Americans. They've looked at the president of Uganda as a beacon of stability in the region. He has fought many wars. He has lent Ugandan soldiers to fight in Somalia, pacify DRC and South Sudan and all of that. So Uganda is a small country, but it has played a really important role in the region. And because of these efforts that our governments make to integrate, sometimes they integrate bad practice as well, So ActionAid is currently involved in a campaign, against fossil fuel extraction. And as we speak and as we campaign, one of the longest, pipelines are being created from Uganda, from Western Uganda, through to Tanzania and to the coast of Tanzania. It's going to have immense implications for livelihoods, ecosystems in that area, and so it's a collaboration between the government of Uganda and the government of Tanzania. So we need to work across the border to kind of raise the concerns of people who live along the areas where the pipeline will pass. Their rights, displacements is happening. We need to defend and work with them to claim these rights and all of that. So we become then a target of huge companies working with governments and trying to put in place huge projects that sometimes really don't directly benefit people. And so the scale of the challenge becomes double or triple because of the regional dimensions of some of these huge projects that cross boundaries. So the difficulties that civil society face in Uganda will not be very different from what they face in Tanzania, will not be very different from what happens in Kenya, because the governments are collaborating, the governments are integrating not just good things but bad practice too.
Sure.
So I personally feel that there is no choice but for us to also continue connecting people's struggles beyond borders. That's the only way we can, not just reimagine but reclaim our dignity as a people. We must move beyond these borders that colonialism created, because we are at the end of the day one people in one region with a similar cause and maybe shared destiny.
Correct.
So we need to work towards that. Yeah.
No, I think the idea of an East African community, the word community is, kind of
particular.
If it's the operative word, if you go into history, the fact that you have these kind of post-colonial borders, right? If you go into history and if you look at civilizations that exist prior to, the arrival of the colonialists in that part of the world, you will see that, you've given the world, if you like, many important lessons, right? And I hope through the processes, I would love to be able to learn more. And I think so much more that, you could teach the world from the East African perspective. And if you look at migration trends and all of that, many of the trends, the migration trends of people leaving Southern Africa went through that part of the world. And people don't just, migrate continuously and like they going in a car or in a plane. People spend, hundreds of years from one place and then move to another year, right? So over tens of thousands of years, a lot of, intellectual work is it. So the example of your grandmother and the pot, where do you think she got it from, right? So the traditional knowledge and values, Arthur, I hope that you will be able to explore and share more in that way.